Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted. That's Let's Talk FGO Wanted. The show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. So we have our first Wanted composed entirely in the new year already. Albert making me work harder, faster, better, stronger. But we've got SSR, Avenger, USHI GOZEN, or Minamoto no Raiko / USHI GOZEN, but we're going to use the shorter of those to avoid confusion. And this is Wanted. If you've never watched this video series before, we're going to go through history, lore, mechanics, and more. Give you a rundown whether or not you want to be rolling on that servant, or if you just want a little extra luck in your rolls. Also, once again, this is for the Fate Samurai Remnant Collab. There will be Samurai Remnant spoilers below. You have been warned. The game came out several years ago now, but they'll be there. Now, beginning at the history section, I do technically have a Wanted video on Minamoto no Raiko, also commonly known as Minamoto no Yorimitsu. That is a previous one that came out, but I can't recommend backtracking there specifically because that was like 8 years old, and it comes from when Wanteds were much shorter and rougher. I'm pretty sure 8 years ago that would be before I even, scripted them. I just, read my notes and improv, loose notations. So, that means we're going to summarize that half of this, the Raiko half, and do that right now. So, Yorimitsu, born sometime 948 CE, died sometime 1021 CE, was the son of Minamoto no Mitsunaka. Yorimitsu was a commander and governor during the Heian period. At the time, the Minamoto served as regents for the Fujiwara. They employed the military force when the Fujiwara would or could not, doing a lot of ruling in their place sort of a thing. And Yorimitsu was one of the first of the Minamoto clan to have their exploits actually recorded. Yorimitsu was known for quelling bandits in Oeyama, being the governor of several provinces, serving as a commander in the Imperial Guard, and being a member of the Ministry of War, being a minister in that department. So, fairly prestigious, serious positions taken and recorded. However, in legends and folklore, the Heian is a much more mystical, spiritual time period, so Yorimitsu, or Raiko, both names, is recorded as a legendary monster slayer accompanied by the Shitenno, the Four Heavenly Kings, which borrows from a concept from Buddhism. And those are Watanabe no Tsuna, Sakata no Kintogi, Urabe no Suetake, and Usui Sadamitsu. And with the Four Heavenly Kings, Yorimitsu is associated with several famous legends, some of which you probably know, either from playing FGO or just in general. I smacked my pop filter with my nose. Yorimitsu is a supporting character in the legend of Kintaro, aka Sakata Kintogi. He, while both a historical figure, also had a whole legend attributed to him. Basically, Yorimitsu finds the grown lad on Mount Ashigara, was so impressed with him that he brought him back to Kyoto to serve as one of his Four Heavenly Kings. Yorimitsu is depicted in several versions of the Tsuchigumo, the Earth Spider, or Earth Spider Demon story, including at least one case where Raiko was mysteriously ill with what is described as malaria. A giant monk, a couple of meters tall, tries to capture him, but Raiko cuts him with a sword, pursues him to Kitano Shrine, and finds an enormous spider there with the kill with iron spikes. In other version, it's Suna who wounds the spider, but Raiko then follows Suna to help finish slaying it. And probably the most famous one, which we are going to be telling in super mega brief, probably the most famous, is Raiko's part in the myths of Shuten Doji, the Oni boss of Mount Oe, or Mount Ibuki in some traditions, has been kidnapping, young ladies in the capital area. Raiko and the Shitenno are dispatched to slay them. They eventually discover the Oni's lair, feed the Oni divine wine, and then cut off its head, though the cut-off head is able to bite Raiko and would have killed him if not for the helmet. Now, for things that are still relevant to this, Minamoto no Yorimitsu is associated with several famous and high-quality swords. The famous is probably the Dojigiri, the Doji slaying sword, which is considered one of the Tenka Goken, the 5 swords under heaven. It's a Tachi-style blade, if you know anything about Japanese sword types. If you don't worry about it. Just know that it's not technically a katana, but it's a national treasure housed in the Tokyo Museum. There are other ones such as the Onikirimaru, the Oni-cutting sword, also thought to have been the one that beheaded Shuten Doji, which is at the Tada Shrine. There are several of Yorimitsu's supposed sword, Hizamaru, which was renamed Kumokiri, Spider Cutter, from the Tsuchigumo legends. There are literally 3 swords claiming to be that sword, so they're all over the place, but there's a lot of these myths, legends, and etc. going around. Now, the USHI GOZEN side of this is a little trickier. Finding formal sources in English is tough, so I apologize that I've basically cobbled this together from what I would say are similar quality sources to my own Wanted, which is basically fans doing research and collating. It is a more obscure story that I think is only specifically brought up in English because of FGO, and isn't even brought up that much in Japanese from what I could find. But the Ushi-Gozen story goes through a few different versions, and it seems to be related to that of the Ushi-Oni, Ox-Oni, or Ox-Demon myth, also known as Gyuki. The Ushi-Oni are a type of yokai which have the head or horns of an ox. They're drawn usually with spider-like bodies, similar to the Tsuchigumo, which does translate roughly literally as earth spider, but is not necessarily supposed to be a spider. I'm using an image of a Gyuki or Ushi-Oni as the bed image for this section of the video. And in some, historical texts from the later period, the mythologizing scrolls, Ushi-Oni are said to be a thing that Yorimitsu has defeated in some stories. They are also associated with Gozu-Tenno, the ox-headed heavenly king, a Buddhist deity who was later syncretized with Susanoo, the storm god. And I will go back to explain kind of how we got here with certain things later in the lore part. But there is an old written account called Ushi-Gozen's Original Place. That story relays, again, in brief, that the wife of Minamoto no Mitsunaka, Raiko's father, in case you forgot that part earlier, but his wife dreamed of the Tenjin of Kitano Shrine again, and that's the deification of Sugawara no Michizane, who became the patron kami of scholarship and learning. Anyway, she dreamed that he came to dwell in her womb, and after a pregnancy of 3 months, a son was born during an ox year, on the ox day, at the hour of the ox. Do you get it? It's an ox child. But the boy, who is described in the story with the phrase that literally translate as younger brother or younger sibling of Raiko, has ox horns in the face of an Oni, so Mitsunaka orders him killed, but his mother has him whisked away to the mountains instead. Eventually, Mitsunaka learns that the Oni child has survived and sends Raiko to kill their sibling. The pair battle it out fiercely. Eventually, Ushi-Gozen tires and is defeated and falls into the Sumida River, which is now in modern Tokyo, and transforms into an enormous ox 30 meters tall and rampages around the area. Now, how exactly we get to that Ushi-Gozen tale to the character you see in FGO, we will cover in the next bit. But that is the extremely compact version of Raiko and Ushi-Gozen's stories. Yorimitsu is fairly represented in pop culture. There are a few other places you can look at them. Obviously, historically, they exist in legends, folktales, and retellings of their various exploits. Again, Tsuchigumo battles are very popular as well in mediums like No and Kabuki, but there are also some modern works. There is a Yorimitsu character in the game Onmyoji. Yorimitsu is the protagonist, or a Raiko-like figure, is the protagonist of the action RPG Otogi, which was made by FromSoft and Sega, by the way, on the PS2, and in a few other places. Now, funnily enough, if you're thinking about this, because oftentimes when I bring stuff up, especially about Japanese or characters in the Japanese pop culture, and you're like, oh yeah, well, Fate wasn't the first to do a gender flip. There is a female Minamoto no Yorimitsu in Nioh 2 as a boss. This game was released in 2020, obviously well after Raiko's appearance as a female character in FGO, so that's probably the other way around. That's not FGO reference that. That's probably the guys working on Nioh 2 saw the FGO thing and went, rub chin, we can work with that. So that means we're moving into the lore segment. And when we're talking about Raiko, which also means we're talking about Ushi-Gozen, we have to untangle the ways and means of how we get to the gender flip. So basically, it seems like, based on, notes about the production of FGO, that Ushi-Gozen was always supposed to be the evil side of Raiko. They kind of already planned this idea from the earliest, based on what I can tell anyway from reading. But the flipping of the genders was decided later. It was a combination of starting from the fact that Gozen is usually used as an honorific to describe Onimusha, warrior women, Tomoe Gozen, etc., and that it was a fairly common theme in the legends associated with Raiko that the Ushi-Oni and other yokai often shapeshift into ladies. So there was already kind of like a air of this going around, and this was apparently decided later in the dev. It was after the research team, dug up some of this stuff that they decided to think about these sort of things. So the interpretation in Fate is that Ushi-Gozen is the quote-unquote younger sister of Raiko, but not really, because they're basically the same. Ushi-Gozen is born to Mitsunaka as the heaven-sent child of Gozu-Tenno, sent away to live in a temple. Eventually, Mitsunaka requests the child, gives them the name Minamoto no Raiko, and employs her as a living weapon against Oni and yokai. It's only later, after meeting the young Kintoki, that Raiko begins to deviate from just following Mitsunaka's orders, basically starts to develop her own personality. This causes Raiko's mentality to become both more individualized and more disturbed until she arranges to, quote-unquote, kill Ushi-Gozen. Through deep meditation, she basically separates Ushi-Gozen from herself, does mortal battle, but Kentoki manages to convince her to save that side of herself and suppress it, sealing away the Ushi-Gozen parts inside Raiko. Now, before we continue with that, we got an aside, but it is a necessary one. Gozu-Tenno. Gozu-Tenno I mentioned a couple of times, and is a Japanese Buddhist deity. Again, translates something like ox-headed heavenly king. They are said to be a bringer and healer of disease and misfortune. Keep in mind, the stuff about malaria and those legends back there. In modern Japanese spiritual beliefs, there was, actual, official reforms. Gozu-Tenno is basically completely syncretized with Susanoo, brother of Amaterasu, god of storms. But originally, he was closer to a Japanese interpretation of the deity known as Taishakuten, which is the Japanese way of saying Sakura, lord of the Devas, which is the Buddhist way of describing Indra, king of the Devas and god of lightning, thunder, rain, and war. So, in a very roundabout method in FGO, we mentioned that Raiko is a child of Indra. She is a heaven-sent child of an incarnation of Indra. We move through the spiritual systems and the mystical belief systems, and we end up at, well, if you are the child of Gozu-Tenno, then you are moved there. Now, it's possible that Susanoo is also syncretic with some Hindu deity, given the Nasuverse leaning heavily on the bridge between Shintoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc. He doesn't come up a lot, which is a little sad, because, he's kind of a big deal. That said, it would be great character stuff, to bring up an interaction between Taomo, who is a mortal incarnation of Amaterasu, and Raiko or Ushi-Gozen in that case. I'm pretty sure original Raiko has a line for regular Tamomo, but it's just kind of like she pointedly doesn't talk about them, and other stuff like that. Anyway, to move back to following the Fate lore, Ushi-Gozen has technically already appeared in FGO, just as a mirrored sprite. If you didn't know, because it was a limited time event you can't access anymore, this was during the Onigaishima event, and Ushi-Gozen was basically Raiko with her sprite slightly spookier, and some different lines. So, Ushi-Gozen was a known quantity. This story was known. It's described in Raiko's interlude. I'm pretty sure that'll be a bullet point later in my script, so on and so forth. And the other thing that's a very strong recurring element of Raiko is that she is a servant who is, as the strongest Mystic Slayer, really capable of fitting into a lot of class roles, and she has a servant who has many different aspects to her personality, due to her origin as an Oni child and a divine incarnation, and these different aspects of herself come to forefront based on which class container she in. Fate sometimes wibble wobbles back and forth, if you're a servant which qualifies for multiple classes, will you actually be different or not? Some servants are, some servants aren't, but Raiko is one of those where she is definitely different. Berserker Raiko, the original normal version, is her as quote-unquote mother. Kendoki's adopted parent figure. She's head of the 4 heavenly kings. This is herself that reabsorbed her Oni blood, hence why she does get some of her more extreme, mana bursts and stuff like that. Lancer Raiko is supposed to be the Shadow Prefect, the version of herself as an enforcer in the capital. She enforces public morals. She's got more businesslike and strict aspects, though, of course, we can't say we know exactly what this version of her is like, because the version we do have is the summer mode, which obviously means she's a little bit off. Everybody in summer's a little weird. Summer's a different thing. And while she's never actually shown in FGO so far, Saber Raiko is alluded to several times. This is supposed to be the Raiko who is the commander of the Imperial Guard, the fearless and peerless warrior who slayed countless bandits and yokai without mercy, generally implying that she would probably not be as, warm and cuddly as Berserker Raiko, despite the fact that Berserker Raiko is the Berserker. That funny little thing. So now then, which one is this one? So, this Raiko, as Ushi-Gozen, first appeared in Samurai Remnant as Rider, the servant of Yui Shosetsu. The Rider form appears to be the one that is closest to having her Ushi-Gozen side out, if not just Ushi-Gozen is in the driver's seat all the time. She's armed with the divine messenger of Gozu-Tenno, the Ushi-Oni made of lightning that's 30 meters tall. She appears like Raiko in her teenage state, sometime after age 15, but before becoming exactly the Raiko we know, somewhere in that range. Also, while Samurai Remnant didn't have to bother with it, the FGO she goes into explicitly using Shapeshift. She has a skill of divine manifestation, which composites divinity, monster strength, and Shapeshift to look like her teenage self. Presumably they had to explain why in the Onigaishima event in FGO, Ushi-Gozen is just Raiko with her sprite facing the other direction. So it seems like the original implication is that Ushi-Gozen would just look like normal Prime Berserker Raiko, if she got out, the time when Raiko, quote-unquote, defeated herself, so she explicitly shapeshifts to look like this one. It also explains why her third ascension is more extreme, because Raita, while had some notes about the original design, got to be a little more freehand with the third ascension. In general, also, I want to touch on this, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch a previous video, and we'll do that, where we've got ads for the Wanteds inside the Wanteds. But the situation with Raiko seems to draw parallels to a recent Wanted feature I did with Usugi Kenshin, the ruler version. Mixing gods and humans via deliberate prayer or not is probably something that we shouldn't be doing. The result with Raiko is that, she's weird and kind of doesn't know how to handle herself, has to take many long years to figure herself out. Kentoki's kind of only okay because Raiko basically decided to break the cycle and, try and be a parent to him despite the fact that his mother was a mountain crone and his father was Red Dragon Raijin. And also, he was a wild child. Like, nobody ever really asked him to do anything, so he kind of, figured out his own spot. Now you may ask, I mentioned earlier that USHI GOZEN is probably normally a rider, the rider class version of Raiko. Why are we an Avenger in FGO? Well, the Samurai Remnant Collab canonically will take place sometime after Samurai Remnant's events, hence the spoiler warnings earlier. So USHI GOZEN remembers the Waxing Moon, or some version of it, because there are, multiple routes in the game. And even aside from that, there are branching decisions as well. But USHI GOZEN remembers something like the plot of Samurai Remnant, and has deliberately manifested as a Demon of Vengeance, hence her class swap. Her skills, abilities, and personality are all basically the same as the Rider, but she's an Avenger, so maybe we can be a little bit more mechanically interesting in FGO. Also, might be a soft setup for the next audio call. Genuinely don't know with these people. Anyway, if you want story feature, USHI GOZEN is going to be in the Samurai Remnant collab, and was obviously in Samurai Remnant. If you want some more, you can go back and, if you can, anyway, go back and check out the Onigaishima event and Raiko's own interludes for the backstory as well. So, mechanics, the mechanics part. Now, typically, Avengers have pretty high attack and pretty low HP. For USHI GOZEN, those two numbers are barely 200 away from each other, but that's still pretty high for an Avenger in terms of HP. There are a couple of Avengers that literally have more attack than they do HP, which is crazy for an SSR. But she's also, quick, Arts Buster, and the only one in the SSR slot that is that way. The only other Avenger with 3 quick cards is Summer Chloe. And she does have higher hit counts, 6 on quick. I believe she's the first triple quick unit to have 6, but also average-ish NP gain. Her NP is AoE quick, which reduces enemy crit chance by 30% for 3 turns and has a 40% chance to stun. The overcharge effect is more damage versus Earth attribute enemies. Pretty normal stuff. So, first skill is going to give you 30-50% damage up versus Demonic, 30-50% damage up specifically versus Servants who are also Earth, so kind of amplifying that trait damage the NP normally does, but only for Servants. And also is a 20-30% crit up, all for 3. Second skill is the Mana Burst, but this is 20-30% quick and Buster up for 3. It's also a 5 times 3 turns buff, where when you perform a critical with quick, it's boosted by 10-20% first, for 3 turns. So if you land enough quick crits, you can stack multiples of these up that don't go away, but you have to trigger a quick crit to do it. Final skill is a big 1-turn bomb, so it's 1 turn of huge star absorption, 30-50% crit up for 1 turn specifically, and 20-30% NP up for 1. It's also your battery, which maxes out at 50%, 30-50. Passives are Avenger D for a little bit of that passive NP gain, well, on hit. The actual passive NP gain is self-replenishment, which is A rank, so it's pretty close to 4%. It's effectively, I think, 4% per turn because it's like 3.8 or something, so, and NP can't be decimaled, so it rounds up to 4, I think, in everything that matters. But we do have Oblivion Correction B for always having 8% crit up. We also still have Raiko's Madness Enhancement EX for that 1 Buster card to hit really hard, and a special Divinity, which is plus 100% damage up, but also I don't know what I was doing there. Quick crits are specifically always 20% up. So, you always have 8% passive crit. If specifically it's a quick crit, it's always 28%. Then you get your multiple layers of, 30% for 3 turns. That 1 turn you're going to hit a total of 80% up. So you're going to have double critical damage with just USHI GOZEN on quick crit specifically. More if you can actually get your 5 hits to your Mana Burst to trigger. So basically what we've got here is that, as you might expect, Ushi Gozen comes from the same school of thought as the original Raiko, but it's been 8 years. So you have an AoE NP to sweep away any adds, and then you use crits to finish off anybody who's left, with multiple hits and lots of extra crit gas for that quick effect, where, in case you don't know, one of the reasons why quick looping became very popular is because the NP amount generated by overkill on quick cards is, like, really, really strong. Possibly was a bug, but is now just kind of part of the expected mechanics. So, with her number of quick cards and the amount of extra crit damage you're going to do on that, you're going to get some overkill damage. So you're going to get some real extra juice out of that. And so she's pretty strong in that department. I don't think she's, like, the strongest ever, but is pretty good in that area. Also, I want to say similar, but kind of different to what they decided to do with Yamato Takeru. She's not exactly a single target, but there is bonus damage on her NP based on overcharge. And then there is further bonus damage on skill number 1, which is specifically for servants who are Earth attribute. So servants who are Earth attribute, and are also demonic, will be hit for very high amounts of damage on her NP, and also pretty high amount of damage on her crit cards. Your 1 Buster card is going to be very spicy because of its, Madness Enhancement EX and the Mana Burst and more, but it's hard to rely on drawing exactly 1 Buster card. So the fact that she is pretty good at hitting single boss targets is pretty useful for boss fights, whether that's challenge quests or story content, main story or event stories. And this means that the critical down and stun effect on the NP might actually matter. Usually if you're farming, you're planning on killing the wave right away, so it doesn't actually matter. But the extra damage should also help you go over the top in farming comps, where sometimes you have to, like, really overtune your AoE damage to make it work. Now, obviously, this means that some of you will be tempted to dust off the old dual Scotty system. This, of course, is very valid. And, of course, now that Summer Scotty is in the mix, you can technically make this a triple Scotty. You double up with either 2 Summers or 2 normal Scotties, and then the third one is the other one. This is pretty decent. I will say, though, Summer Scotty has some extra support for Buster cards. Like I said, Ushi Gozen only has the 1. You really can't count on that, but it's still something to keep in mind. It will hit like a truck. There are a couple of other funny ones to look out for. I did compare to how Yamato Takeru is a AoE servant who is trying to pretend to be single target with certain effects. Takeru doesn't really care about overcharge that much. Ushi Gozen does want to get some extra overcharge because that is where her bonus damage is located, so you're going to consider investing in multiple NP levels and consider raising that overcharge. Takatsuki Shinsaku is a quick support servant who helps out your overcharge. He gives the whole party +1 overcharge, so that will help her get more bonus damage. And in this upcoming year, 26, there's a couple of off supports you want to keep an eye on. The June event will have alter egos Hibiki and Shikage, which gives the party NP and NP battery and NP gain up, a big max HP buff, in addition to raising quick up. So that can be very helpful to kind of pad out your defenses a little. Avengers are kind of frail. And the winter event with Lohi is another berserker who gives the whole team quick up, NP, and some evade, but also strips enemies of defensive buffs on a skill, which is a thing that you might want to consider for that. So there's a couple of incidental synergies out there. If you're looking for like a single target hitter, you might be able to make Kagekyo work. But yeah, in general, you're going to want to focus on slotting in the normal quick supporters for AoE sweeps. And like I said, if you get a little bit of extra spice, consider adding some overcharge levels or some defenses in there. Other than a 40% chance to stun and a 30% crit rate down, Ushi Gozen does not have any defensive skills. Now for CEs, again, spoiled for choice. Very good selection so far this year with servants who have good CE comps. Ushi Gozen does have a 50% battery, so you have a strong selection there. That is also your one-turn like NP damage up, so you might want to save that for a particular wave, but you can start with 50% CEs if you're going to battery right away. Consider, again, plus overcharge levels so you can get that damage bonus up. Otherwise, some combination of attack up, NP up, crit up, and quick up are all viable. You know, you got to look at this servant and see that she has so much crit focus in her kit, you are going to be coasting on some battles by making some critical hits after. And especially since they fixed quick to add a little bit of free crit chance, if it's the chain starter, you can get a lot done. If you're going full double Scotty or any other combinations, you can skip those and jump straight to full buffs. Don't include any, amount of battery level. And consider CEs that offer you additional trait damages to maybe boost that damage up or other stuff like that. She's quick, so getting Ushi Gozen Pierce Invulnerable should probably be pretty easy if you need to do that. Like I said, she doesn't have any hard defenses herself, and she doesn't really do anything about enemy defenses if you are trying to use her in boss fights or challenge quests. For farming, again, very straightforward options you've got going on. Now, for the other stuff, mats. As an Avenger, USHI GOZEN is all mats, no need for statues for Ascension. It's only 10 of each, shouldn't be too troublesome, all pretty normal stuff. Now, skills, it's also just mats, which can be a little cleaner, but you will have to keep an eye out for a few things. The probably most important there is she's going to need 15 Remnants of Madness, which is an Ordeal Call 1 mat. That is one of your monthly mats right now, so be sure to stock them. But yeah, you're going to need 45 total to max out your skills on that one. And these are all pretty decent skills. I don't think any of them is like, you can leave at absolutely nothing forever. But you should be able to get up to that point pretty easily if you've got a decent collection of these mats and haven't been blasting them all without a care into your class scores. Funny how that works. Now for banners, USHI GOZEN's a little bit tricky. Like a lot of SSRs we're getting this year, the rate of reruns is a little weird. Like, you will get reruns, but they're not going to be distinct campaigns, so you're going to have to use your noggin. So she's going to debut Samurai Remnant Collab. I just double-checked the maintenance is happening, tonight as of recording, so this video will be up while maintenance is ongoing. So yeah, that's that one. And next year before the Summer Lotto event, I think the description of the event was like July box event. It probably won't actually be in July because of anniversary stuff. But the Summer Lotto will have a proper banner. But otherwise, it's all going to be GSSRs and the various expansive class campaigns, Grand Duel Extra, Avenger Weekly campaign, etc., that are going to be happening in 2027 in EN. So that's where we're at. You'll have plenty of chances to pick her up, but it's going to be crammed in with lots of other banners. And that's going to be about it. Stay alive in the new year, everybody. Have fun. And we'll let you get on out of here. As usual, be sure to do all the video things. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, leave your comments down below, whatever. Join our Discord. We're going to be starting doing our movie nights soon. So, Discord time good. Consider channel memberships. And consider supporting us on Patreon, because you can get access to this video early. And other goodies at certain levels. And I'll give you more of a shout out in a second, after the musical outro. And before we go, I just want to remind you this episode is brought to you by our patrons, like Out of the Harp, Mr. G, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, Jitty McDozen, Chris Charlotte, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Ramen, Sharvor, and many more. If you want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for your support, everybody.